All right. Welcome back, everyone. Let's get started after the break. So, right before the break, you guys heard from some recent graduates who are currently dealing with the challenges of implementing AI in manufacturing and operations. On our next panel, moderated by Professor Retsef Levi of the MIT Sloan School of Management, will provide the C-suite perspective. Let me first give a brief introduction to our panelists before I hand it off to Retsef to moderate. So Don Fitzgerald is the CTO of SharkNinja and a graduate from the MIT LGO program class of 1994. Over the course of her career, Dawn has served in leadership positions at American Family, Schneider Electric, IBM, and numerous high-tech startups. Saman Farid is the CEO and founder of Formic. He is also the founder of Comet Labs, an AI-focused investment fund and incubator, and he currently serves as an investor or board member for a mix of 25 or more robotics, technology, and AI-focused businesses. Dan Kearns is the CTO of Falkonry and has over 20 years of experience designing and building new software products focused on large enterprises and analytics. And last but not least, Elliot Robson is the CEO of Eduworks, which provides the first AI microservices platform to revolutionize the management of divergent data for complex organizations. So please join me in welcoming our panel to the stage.
Okay, thanks everybody. We really have a terrific set of people, and what I like about the composition of the people that we have on the panel, that they really represent different perspectives, both from as an internal perspective within large organizations that wish to use AI technologies at scale, but also people that interact with startups and have also experience in entrepreneurship in this space, and we'll try to cover both angles in today's discussion. And I'm going to briefly introduce what the focus of today is going to be, and then jump right into asking our panelists questions. So I think that there is a consensus that AI technologies, machine learning, are going to make a dramatic impact on businesses, on society, and on our lives. And there's a lot of excitement and also concerns about what that impact might be. But I also think that it's fair to say that more often than not, we can see slower than maybe hoped progress in the ability to disseminate these technologies in many organizations. And the focus of today will be to try and talk about some of the challenges and the related opportunities and what could be some strategies to address them in order to be able to disseminate at scale these type of technologies. And again, we're going to take two perspectives here. One, the perspective of a large organization that wants or desires to internally use these technologies, and also the lens of an entrepreneurial effort of a startup. So we're going to try to cover multiple topics as time permits, and also hopefully leave enough time for some questions from the audience. And I think that the first topic, I think, was already mentioned today multiple times, and this is the issue or the challenge related to data maturity. I think that it's clear to everybody that this is a key enabler for the AI revolution. And it's something that many organizations are struggling with securing or obtaining the maturity needed to use these technologies. And I think at the same time, one of the major barriers for startups is, more often than not, access to data. So I would like to start with Elliot. Elliot, you have quite a rich experience of working with many organizations, probably being exposed to different levels of maturity, of data maturity. To ask you and to share your experience, and perhaps maybe try to kind of describe to us the picture of what is the best in class currently, what is average, what is the starting level looks like, and perhaps also what could be some useful advice in terms of developing strategy for organizations to evolve their data maturity.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's a great topic, and obviously we've heard a tremendous amount all day about data. You need data, you need data. And I apologize. Sometimes I like to tell stories, and I like to relate things to my own experience. There's a wonderful 80s British comedy called Yes Minister, which is a personal favorite. Some of you know it. And there's a phrase in there where they say, the last thing that a politician ever wants to do is be courageous. Today I'm going to be a little bit courageous, which is not a good idea as a CEO either. You're not supposed to do that. But when we are here, like right now at this time, we're actually sort of at the cusp of what I think is a dramatic change in how data is acquired, used, and in fact generated for organizations. So you asked me to sort of go through, best in class backwards. I'm going to go the other way. Apologies, but I've spent most of my career working with data ranging from building research analytics departments to building whole companies that help the U.S., big U.S. agencies, U.S. Department of Defense, National Science Foundation, et cetera, tackle data problems. And just about 2 weeks ago now, I had a very difficult phone call where I had to talk to a leader in the U.S. Navy, in fact, and say, for the last 6 years, we've been supporting you on a digitization effort, an effort to bring together legacy data sources, some of those really worst-in-class data sources, PDFs, ancient systems, things that are not instrumented at all. And I had to talk to this leader and say, given where we are today with our technology, I think I could do everything we've done in the last 6 years in about 6 months. And I feel bad about that. You never like telling a client that we've spent 6 years working with you, but we don't really need that anymore. Of course, I will say in traditional U.S. Navy fashion, the response was, that's absolutely amazing, but we're budgeted for 2024, so we can't wait to write this into the scope of work for 2025.
So what changed? What do you think changed that changed the answer from 6 years to 6 months?
Absolutely. So again, I speak from our experience. Our technology that we're really working on bringing out with organizations at scale involves AI microservices. So orchestrating very small models, working together, moving away from large monolithic models and stacks. And using that, we've actually been able to float. I don't like the term language model because we're typically not working with language with a lot of this stuff, so I'm just going to call them transformer models. Apologies, but there you have it. So floating transformers on top of data sets and live data streams and using those models to actually do what we would think of as traditional data cleaning, data integration, data alignment, digitization, and then linking that to human data. So this is, and I think when Arch was presenting earlier, they were talking a lot about having people describing stoppages in work and getting human data. That piece has become increasingly important because rather than trying to build a pre-existing structure, so go through the standard digitization path where you build a data schema and do all that.
Can you give us an example of a microservice? Just, I'm sure people would appreciate an example, so we'll know what you're talking about. So.
Absolutely. So right now we're working with a very, very large cyber client. They've got 80 billion transactions a day in a huge data lake. They've got a problem, level 1 triage. So they get all of these alerts that say, hey, this might be bad, this might be bad, this might be bad. However, their team can't even possibly do triage on all of these alerts. So we've worked with them to model the human behavior and build microservices that actually act as a particular threat actor, look at live data streams as they're coming in, and just do summarization. So do that translation that we saw in a couple of our previous presentations from raw data streams into a human interpretable summary that then goes to an expert who can just look at it and say, good, bad, yes, no. You can, of course, try to automate that piece as well, but we do like there to be a human in the loop a lot of the time.
That's great. So, Don, you have the perspective of someone that is leading an organization that is on the journey of already using some AI technologies but have desires to use many more. Could you share with us your perspective of the issue of data maturity and the challenge?
Yeah, okay. So I'm actually going to broaden it a little bit. I'm going to describe, because I've got both the enterprise, multiple different large enterprise experience, and I've also got the startup experience. And when I take a look at the question of data, we have to look at it today, now, right? This is not the data problem that I was looking at 5 years ago. This is a different data problem. And what I describe to the teams that I'm talking to, both large company and startups, is that we've got to think of our AI, because everyone's being told you really have to use AI. You really need to do this or you're going to be left behind, which I agree with. So when we're saying we have to use that AI, how are we going to get that AI? And then that really reflects on how we get our data and how we have to manage that data. So the data management problem depends on where you're getting your AI. So if you're in a team, call it a startup, and you want to say, I want to get my AI, you may not have a set of data scientists. And I do, for illustrative purposes, describe 3 different ways, illustrative, so nobody lose your mind here when we talk about, for illustrative purposes, think of getting your AI in 3 different ways. You either get it through your data scientists, which is really what we've been talking about mostly here today. You've got a data science team, you're doing your algorithms, you have got data engineers, and you are managing that whole bigger data management picture. The second bucket that you could get your AI from is indeed that off-the-shelf generative AI, and I'm going to tell you that there are going to be a tremendous number of startups who are going to be leveraging that because they really don't have the funds to bring up a full data science team and do the traditional AI that everyone's used to. And then that third way is AI as a service. And in that AI as a service model, there's a third party coming in and helping you to create your AI more customized to what you need. Now let's think about the data models around that. Yes, the traditional AI and managing that data model, that's on you because you own the team and you've got to do your tagging and you've got to do your scrubbing, and there's a tremendous amount of work there. You have to be all in on that. For the generative AI, the data model question's a very different one because it's a self-service tool, but you're going to be having teams utilizing that. And so the data question is really what's out there. What's the internet? What's being harvested? And the question to me shifts a lot more to the checking what you're getting on the other side. Because I had some very interesting experiences when engineers are diving into the generative AI, utilizing that to solve some of their real life problems. They're not controlling the data that's in, or they could bring it in, but there's a lot of leveraging of existing external data. And then that third one, you're really putting a lot of the burden of managing the AI and the data and the models and all of that on that third party, that AI as a service. So I really encourage people to step back and look at those 3 buckets of where you can get your AI from an illustrative purpose, and then really understanding how the data has to be managed differently depending on which one you're using.
Thanks, that's great. Saman and Dan, you have experience from the startup perspective, and I wonder, what discussions do you have when you hear about a new idea and you consider investments or advice? What kind of discussions do you have with startups about data and accessibility of data and data maturity?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing that comes to mind when it comes to startups and the way that they kind of cold start these machine learning models without access to data is something I'm a little embarrassed to say in front of this crowd of people, but is you fake it till you make it, right? I think most startups will use manual humans to do the work that you assume that the AI should do for a certain period of time. And that is how you generate your data source. You provide a service to your customer, and there's a huge amount of human annotation involved. And that process allows you to generate data and to generate value for the customer. Probably it costs you more to provide the service than you can collect for doing that service. But usually that's a quick way to kind of bootstrap building these AI models. That being said, I think in the last 6 months even, that paradigm has changed a lot, where there's a lot of studies that have come out that these AI models, the only thing that really drives performance is the volume of data. All of the kind of things around annotation and even kind of model complexity and model design have become less and less relevant. The only thing that matters at the end of the day is data volume. And in fact, kind of the transfer learning part of it is interesting, where data from one domain that is completely unrelated can actually help with the inference in a totally separate domain. as you see with these large language models. And so I think that there's a lot of good examples of people starting to kind of take these open source large language models that have been trained on the entirety of kind of human knowledge and then fine tune it, for a specific application and get better performance than the last generation of AI models that were kind of built specifically for one task. And I think that's something that's very exciting because the signal that it tells me, and I think that tells a lot of startups, is like all of the effort that was put into thinking really carefully about like what data do I need to collect and how am I going to collect it and exactly how am I going to get it. All that is wasted effort. Really, like the answer is just like put cameras on everything, put sensors on everything, and just kind of dump it all into somewhere. And over time, like the AI will figure out how to make sense of it in a way that's useful to you. So, almost like we have to become dumber to make the model smarter, but I think it actually has turned out to work.
Dan?
That's interesting. It probably turns out to be a really good segue into, I had two thoughts about data sort of driven from this morning's conversations. One, like there's no shortage of anecdotes of problems with data. But the other thing was sort of dates back to, I was working in insurance, got kind of interested in systemic discrimination and how it affects models. And one of the most interesting things a data scientist ever said to me, it's an opportunity and a challenge, right? So it's like minority class data is always going to have, by definition, more variance than other data. So any kind of system that has thresholds is always going to discriminate against minority class data. But it's also an opportunity in the more variance because the model will have a hard time placing things in high dimensions sometimes, so that there's opportunities to exploit soft boundaries between classes that have to do segmentation. So I think in that vein, the fake it to make it is definitely, it's a real thing, right? There are many companies that say they're doing AI that are doing no such thing at all, right? And they might do it someday, right? But like the Theranos model, while disreputable in the public company space, is like, I wouldn't even denigrate that as a way to do startups. Like there is no other option than that. But it is also important to remember that literally no data is free, right? Like someone paid to collect every piece of data that exists anywhere. Someone's paying to store it. Someone's paying to transmit it, right? And so like you kind of can't forget where did it come from and like what are the systemic implications of that.
So just as a follow-up question to both of you, so when you think about startups, one of the, not in AI, in general, one of the questions that people ask, okay, what are going to be the barriers for entry? If you're successful, what's going to be your unique kind of capability that will sustain your success? So when I'm listening to you, it's not obvious to me that I hear a clear answer to that. Do you have kind of, did you think about that?
Well, I mean, so there's, like you can go read the books, the elephant books, right? So like if someone's paying over $1 billion for a foundational model, you're not going to do that, right? Like you're going to do either something that's adjacent, in which case you're an acquisition target, or you're going to get destroyed, but it's going to happen pretty quickly, or you're doing something that's downstream that's going to find a way to target that and use it, refine it, figure out how to make it work in some specific verticalized domain, or you're a genius and you have some better algorithm and you're going to move the whole thing down the energy efficiency chain or whatever else, right? So I think, that's one of those things, right? Like you can just sort of accept that these are solved problems, and I don't think they are. I don't think any of them are, right? Like there's a lot of room for all aspects of where AI is right now.
Yeah, I'm not sure I 100% agree. I mean, I think that any company there are very few companies in the world that I think can genuinely claim that they're AI companies. I think the vast majority of companies are application companies. And I think all of the complexity around building a business is in figuring out how to deliver value out of that AI model. The AI model itself over time becomes interchangeable. The pace of change is so fast that you can't say, oh, I built the best AI and that's gonna be my defensibility. The defensibility in the long run is like how you can deliver value on that. And so like, when I have invested in all these different companies, like my advice to all the founders is always like either you solve 100% of the problem or you've solved 0% of the problem. There's no in between. Right? You can't say I'll provide an API and then you figure out how to use it, or I'll provide a model and you figure out how to use it, or I'll provide this sensor suite and you figure out how to use it. Like that's not how it works, right? Like for a customer, a particular customer who's not spending all their time thinking about AI, like the only thing that you can do is solve 100% of a problem. And then how you solve it is for you to figure out. And like whether you use AI or not, you use pretend AI or real AI or large language models or something else. Nobody cares, right? The customer doesn't care as long as you can deliver the outcome.
Yeah, is it maybe an interesting anecdote there? Right? I'll give you 2 days in the life of a startup. Right, this was an acquisition of a previous company. So the day before, this company was a startup in machine learning, and their message was like the algorithm is critically important and the tooling is critically important to this problem space. And that's the thing that you have to get right in order to be productive here. The day after the acquisition, the messaging is the algorithm is a commodity. The integration and contextualization of the thing is 100% of the problem, and we can swap algorithms whenever, right? Yeah. But the whole end-to-end chain works now for all of these cases that it didn't work for yesterday.
Actually, if you don't mind. Since we're in the business of being courageous and disagreeing with each other here, I'm going to disagree with you a little bit here.
Just a little bit. That's what I.
It might because we're a team here as a panel and we're being collaborative. No, I'm not sure. I don't agree that you have to solve 100% of a problem or 0%, and that's because in business, as you know, problems are multidimensional, and in particular, it's the specific dimensions that many businesses and actually many startups really forget that real implemented software and process has a life cycle. It's not you drop it in and it's done. There's an entire life cycle management that goes into this. And so one of the places where actually I've seen success in both previous companies and my current company has sometimes been saying, we have a better application layer, a better platform. We're going to have to figure out how it delivers value to you, so it's not a 100% solution, but we have fully thought through the lifecycle management and scalability. So unlike every other solution out there, when you drop this in, we have complete audit trails, complete CI/CD, and all of the other pieces that make something really enterprise ready. So I'm going
to argue with you. So we'll go back and forth.
Take my side, Don.
I actually am. Because
go ahead, and after that, I want to ask you another question.
Yeah, so to me, when I'm taking a look at, I agree, it's got to be 100%, because to me, it's the value. Really, the consumer, the enterprise to enterprise, they don't care. Just give me a solution. So they don't care about our software development lifecycle, which I dearly love, but they don't care about that. They just want to have that full solution. And they really, we're going to see, and we already are seeing, that every product out there, whether it is a tool in our manufacturing line, whether it is a design tool in our design flow, it's all going to be with AI, and it's going to be completely transparent to us. It's just all going to be there. It's a value statement.
Sorry to interchange, but if I can just add one small thing. I think this is a very common trap that startups fall into, because the early adopters are the ones who don't want 100% solution.
Sure.
The early adopters want to tinker with it and mess with it and be able to do it on their own. But then when you get to the majority, right, like the vast mass market of users, they don't care. They just want the polish, right? And I think that's the difference.
So we'll get back to this topic in just a second.
We have
I have actually a whole topic about how we make products. But I do want to ask, and before we move to another topic, I want to ask you another question that is related to data, which I don't think I've heard a clear answer yet. So my experience that often organizations struggle with the fact that they don't have a data-driven language, business language. That their current decision processes are based on some more anecdotal gut feeling, and they are not amenable to naturally using data. I would like to pick up your perspective as to what extent that's a challenge, and to what extent maybe we don't pay enough attention to this challenge.
For Don.
For whoever, that's the hard question is, and whoever.
Two interesting anecdotes in that space that I've heard. One, and they're both of how people got the data-driven religion, right? One came out of the finance space, and it was about hiring analytics, right? Interview analytics. And their question was, can we identify high performers in our hiring process? And so they actually did go and measure it and determine that they couldn't. But by 9 months in, they could definitely, and so their whole process became just hire everyone from the entire MBA class, work them to death, and in 9 months you know which ones you want to keep. There was another one, it was basically the same scenario happened, but this was in UX design, so a consumer-facing web app. And they had a bunch of product managers with theories about like, hey, we have 3 different designs and we think they're going to be easier. And it was about the time where A/B tests, split test tools became possible to integrate without a ton of work. And so they started like routinely doing the split testing, and they conclusively proved to themselves that they could not predict, like which user interaction design was actually going to be more usable. So I think that's one of those things. Like you have to find those things where like you actually prove to yourself that everything you thought was true wasn't true, before you can kind of reset and then go back and figure out what can you use data for and where not.
So essentially, I think you're raising a very interesting perspective. If I want to think about the startup, right? Like I need to really find a place where maybe data is not being used currently at scale, but can, and build a solution that brings data to bear, bring it to bear to actually provide a superior solution. And for some reason, I don't think that when I at least talk with people in the industry, I don't always get that perspective. It's usually driven by the technology and not by the perspective you just shared. But I don't know what other people think about it. So.
Yeah, I was going to just say that I think it's something that needs to be an ongoing. You can't just have it as a startup and then say, oh yeah, it's going to stay with me. It's something that as you evolve in your company and the values and the demands and the problems and the needs, where are we going to be looking for that data? And the data is going to be, again, pulled out of that value. Where do I need to know more about my whole business experience, right? It's all functions in my business, and that's what's going to drive it. But it has to be something that I believe is intentionally revisited, maybe quarterly, definitely at least annually, but to me, more quarterly basis.
Okay, so another thing that emerged already in the discussion, I think at least implicitly, and I'm going to rely on a concept that my colleague here at MIT Sloan School of Management, Charlie Fine, coined many years ago, which is, it talks about the clock speed of industries. And what it tries to capture is how fast, how rapid the technology is changing. And I think that it's fair to say that it's quite remarkable to see the speed by which the technology in the AI space has changed. If we would talk maybe a year ago, half a year ago, we probably have very, very different discussion. And now it's all about transformers, language models. And I think that many would say that potentially we are going to continue to see very rapid changes. So that's exciting if you're a technologist. But if you are an organization, that's also a pretty big threat. And again, I would like to, and this time we'll start with Saman and Dan. And how do you, if you have an entrepreneurial idea and you have a technology that is sort of state of art, you might find yourself 3 months later being obsolete, right? So how do you actually cope with something like that?
Yeah, I think this is the classic, hammer looking for a nail analogy, right? Where I think a lot of entrepreneurs, particularly technical founders, start companies with exactly the mindset that you said, which is, I built this really cool technology. I bet you everybody wants it. Let me figure out somebody who will pay me for it. And I think that's completely the wrong way to start a company, because, like you said, the technology becomes obsolete, super, super quickly. And I think the successful entrepreneurs are the ones who very, very quickly identify a business problem and a business need, and then understand everything there is to know about that business need, and then invest a lot of time and energy to have a differentiated advantage around being the one who's best able to solve that business need, and then is willing to throw out their baby in terms of what the technology is, because it's going to change so quickly. And I think there's many, many examples of this, but I can give an anecdote, which is, I invested in this company called Ripcord, which is a document management company. And so, it sounds very boring, but they basically built robots that scan paper, right? Large volumes of paper. And they spent years and years kind of developing this amazing thing that can take out the staples and take out the bindings and make sure that you scan every sheet. And that was their original go-to-market. They went to a bunch of companies, and then a lot of companies said, yeah, like this is cool, but really what I really need is like a better way to manage access control to these documents once they're scanned, and I need a way to be able to search for these specific type of things, and I need a way to kind of automatically action. Like if I see a purchase order, then I need to be able to kind of have such and such, follow-on effects. And like, so then they started building all of those tools to the extent that now like 99% of their customers don't use their scanning service at all. They just upload PDFs to them, and then they do kind of the document management. And they're a very successful company, and they're doing very well. But I think like what they stumbled into over time was, hey, here's the business problem that my customer really, really cares about, and let me build a whole sequence of things. And if that means that sometimes I have to help them scan the physical paper, then I'll do that too, right? But the vast majority of the time, my task is like get the business value out of the documents, whatever form it comes in.
Dan? And then.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I took the question in a little bit different direction, where I think about like the clock speed related to AI. There's this, I'm sure people have heard of this concept of the healthcare singularity, right? So it has two definitions. One is the point where new discoveries are put into practice at exactly the time that they're discovered. There's another one, which is the point where a practitioner would need to spend 100% of their time in training in order to stay current. And both of them have already been passed there, right? So there's this sort of like inevitability of the data speed and the obsolescence of knowledge, and how do workers adapt to the fact that all their knowledge is obsolete, right? Like what skills do they need to have once the responsibility for knowledge has been delegated to a system that can keep up, and so that's sort of this like, you're gonna have to learn how to do that, right? Because it's gonna happen in every industry, and it's gonna happen probably sooner than later. So, it's sort of like a capability acquisition problem, right? Or an existential problem. Like you have to learn how to use these things. It's like, which is sort of like, I heard a lot about like, you have to do the project for the ROI or those kind of things, but like you have to do the project if you want to have a company in 5 years, right? And it doesn't actually, like if you're not failing some percentage of those projects, you probably didn't diversify your learning process well enough, to make it sustainable.
Elliot?
Yeah, so this time I'm going to agree with you. So, we gotta mix it up every once in a while. But something that I've said to a lot of our clients and people that I just generally advise on this topic is that while the AI revolution, generative AI, transformer, whatever you want to call it, is cool, that the locus of value hasn't really shifted, that understanding your product market fit, how you're delivering value to your internal constituents, your external customers, other businesses, that is still the heart of what you're doing. However, to go a little bit further on what you're saying, there is, however, an opportunity that comes with this clock speed, with this rate of change, and that's that new technologies that solve old problems also create new problems. And so there is actually a new opportunity to recognize gaps that are emerging within new technologies, whether that's hallucination being an issue with transformer models, but we're trying to pick them up in highly regulated industries like aviation or healthcare. Or we saw earlier, there was a slide talking about the robustness issue for these things. So while these new technologies are being adopted and are continuing to evolve, they also create new opportunities. And so, capturing those moments and recognizing that product market fit, even if it is on the technology side sometimes, is absolutely a path to value.
Thank you. So
maybe
before we continue, I just
more?
want to check on time. How much time we have left? 9 minutes, okay.
All right, so
go ahead.
I'll finish on that one. So the clock speed question. Last year I got an opportunity to present at a Reuters event, and my key message to that C-suite group was adopt or perish. So from my point of view, this is something that we absolutely have to, as companies, handle, and we have to handle it at the clock speed that it's going at. How do we do that? From my point of view, we have to go through and say to our teams, we have to enable them. We have curious employees. We have teams that are curious, technology teams, or even other teams in the function, in the company. So how do we enable them? We have to put around for them what I call the guardrails or the trust triad. To me, that's security, privacy, and responsible use. And as leaders, we need to set that framework up for the organization. But then we have to get on the wave. We cannot let it go by us. So for a lot of people, and I mentioned those 3 buckets, the traditional AI, the generative AI, and then the AI as a service, When you're looking at that, you can have all three flavors in your organization, but the clock speed by which it's going and it's transversing, we have to be able to enable our teams so that they can get on board and then they can do and engage that, whether it's in their actual product or whether it's in the functions in the organization itself.
Thank you. Okay, we have less than 9 minutes, and I'm going to combine the last two topics that I want to discuss before we hopefully have time for one or two questions from the audience. I would like maybe to go around and if you can give your most important advice to people, again, either large organizations that want to go on the journey or continue on the journey of adopting AI technologies or startups. And if you may, I would like to also hear your thoughts on another challenge that I think is very, very real, which is how you make products out of these technologies. I think that often, both internally and externally, going from a technology to a product is a big challenge. So you don't have to address that question, but I just want to throw it as something that might inform your last addressing to the audience. So we start from
sure.
here.
So my advice, and this is advice that I've given to a couple of very big organizations recently, would be to, at the moment, completely ignore technology and sit down and do exactly what everybody should be doing, which is envisioning the future of your company in the market, in the world that you see, decide where you want to go, and then go back to technology and figure out how you want to get there. We've built a phenomenal set of enabling tools that, as we said, continue to evolve very quickly. But if you let yourself go from a tech perspective first, you're going to be regressive and reductive as opposed to imaginative and taking a leadership stance. So yeah, that would really be the advice.
That's great. Yeah. So from my perspective, there's tremendous. I mean, this is our software development lifecycle. That when we have our AI, this is software. So my thoughts around productization is going to be the same as I would for any product. You're going to take your software, you're going to evolve it through. The extra piece you have to do is that trust triad I mentioned, where you have to take that extra level of care and the extra level of focus, but really bringing that forward. And then the other piece of that is everyone's products will now have AI in it. So it's going to become the norm, and things that are going to be transparent to people, they're not going to actually see that. My biggest piece of advice is to enable the teams and give them that structure that's necessary to explore the AI and the different components of the business.
I have an answer that's like maybe very, very practical or tactical.
I think that's what people wants to hear.
Which is probably not right 100% of the time, but I think 90% of the time, I think the answer to both like what product should you build and as an organization, how do you adopt new technology is something called as a service, right? Which is something that I think we're all very familiar with the concept, and it's a little bit cliche, but it's not a new idea, right? It's the idea fundamentally in economics around specialization, right? Like we don't build our own power plants. If you're gonna start like a factory that makes chocolate chip cookies, you're not gonna build your own power plant. You're gonna buy electricity as a service, right? You're gonna get sewage as a service. And like you can't expect every company to become an expert in every single thing, and AI is no different, right? And I don't think it's reasonable to say every company in the world is gonna become an AI company, or every company in the world is gonna become a robotics company, and that's how we're gonna get adoption of this technology. I don't think that's what's gonna happen. I think it's similar to power generation and getting internet and ISPs and all these other things where cloud services, everybody decided, hey, I'm probably not the best at building server farms and running air conditioning systems in my server farms, and like I'm just going to let somebody else do that for me, and I'll just buy cloud services. And I think that's the approach. Like specialization is the thing that drives adoption of technology, especially as the technology evolves very, very quickly. Not to kind of toot my own horn of a plug, but like for Formic, what we do is we provide robots as a service to factories, and like we're currently putting robots in about 100 factories in America and expanding at a rate of about 30 to 40 a month. And these factories, like 95% of our customers, never had a single robot. And I think this is pretty representative of what I'm talking about as a service, right? Like these are factories that make all kinds of products, lawnmowers and components for automotive and aerospace and defense and food and dog food and all kinds of things. And like this is the way that they're getting robots, right? Like they're saying, okay, I'll just pay you by the hour and just come put come put this component in this box. I don't care how you do it. If you use a robot or a gantry or a human or whatever, right? Like just get it done. I think that's exactly the same thing that is going to happen with AI. Is there going to be a small number of companies that specialize in using AI to solve X problem, and then they're going to go and offer it to everybody as a service. So maybe that's overgeneralization, but that's my
that
prediction.
third bucket I mentioned. AI as a service.
Yeah.
It's out there. It's real.
Yeah, I think that's one of those areas where, maybe this is where MIT can help with this too, right? It's like that Purdue model is super broken, right? Like as soon as I put his robot in my factory, I've broken every aspect of that, right? And like the AI is not binary either, right? It's not like I was a dumb factory, now I'm a smart factory, right? It's I've given some chunk of thing limited autonomy based on some kind of trust calculation, right? So it is kind of, even back to the are you a business problem solver or whatever, like we have a running bet of like, when does AI disappear from our website, right? At what point are we an whatever company and not an AI company that does whatever, right? And so you can kind of track how mature is it in your industry by, what is the, what's on the website, right? So like the vacuums probably don't come with AI on them yet, right? They're going to grow AI in their title like next year or right now, and then it's going to go away later, and they're just going to be vacuums again.
Nice. Yeah. Okay. So I think it's time for maybe questions from the audience. Any questions? Anybody? Yeah. Okay.
When we're talking about AI as a service, particularly for manufacturing or healthcare applications, or even for any startup, where is there a trade-off between like leveraging, the off-the-shelf model that was trained on the whole internet versus, like for example, an application we're considering is like labeling, because labels are highly FDA regulated, they take a lot of time, there's a lot of opportunity for improvement, but like I can't just get a Gen AI model that's gonna be able to, I'm gonna have to train it on like proprietary data. So where does, I guess, the challenge come with the software as a service and, having to train it on data that's proprietary, data that companies, wouldn't necessarily want going into the ether of publicly available data? And I guess the second part two of that question, and something that I've been thinking through just, with some conversations more with friends, is what is the owner of that AI language model? Like if I'm using it on my computer, what is it learning about me in terms of the way I'm asking those questions, or what types of questions I'm asking?
Great. I'll start with a quick answer on that one. So for the AI as a service, you're engaging a third party, and so you're going to have a contract in place with them that says, hey, my stuff's confidential and I own my stuff, right? So that is one that you'd, by design, when you engage with that third party and they're doing that AI work for you, you'd put that in there. When you're using that off the shelf, those generative AI models, you have to be very careful, because and you can get the ChatGPT example, they've got the free one, which is it's open to the world and they're tracking you. You've got the Teams, which is more private, and then you've got the enterprise level, which is going to be completely private. So you have to be looking very carefully. You don't want to be uploading your code base, for your software development product to the generative AI unless it's an enterprise level and has that full security, privacy, and responsible use in place. And those are the guardrails that I mentioned that need to be added in.
I was going to say, I think that I don't know what the answer to that question is, but I do think that's a question that only exists during the interim state, which is right now we're at a place where the generative models are kind of very general purpose, but they're not super good at a lot of specific tasks. I think that's going to change in the next 18 months. And the vast majority of tasks that you thought it would only be able to do if I gave it all of my very specific data, it's going to be able to do in 18 months or 24 months. And I think the vast majority, not every single thing, but, and so like, I think there's an interim state where it's like, well, it's not going to be able to do it unless I do some fine tuning or some extra training. But like, I think a lot of those kinds of tasks are going to disappear pretty soon.
But I think there's also another just important model here. We're talking about as a service, and we're imagining that as a service inherently means cloud-based. But with a lot of sort of highly regulated industries, so almost everybody that we work with, for example, wants their stuff on-prem, right? We can still deploy the same technology 50 places. It's all containerized. It's in Docker containers and managed by Kubernetes and follows software practices, but it's on-prem and it's run locally. And because of that, there's never an issue around, can I fine tune on my own data sets, because we never get that back. We're not trying to be extractive from our users. And so I think those sorts of arrangements are going to become more and more common as well. And alongside, and that, I think those are going to go hand in hand with more specialized models, because we're doing that. Like, absolutely, the future is.
Yeah, I think that idea of this as a temporary situation is valid too. Like, I'm sure some of you remember the days of like actual fist fights about ERP, right? And is our financial process so special that we can't let a commercial vendor, understand it?
So one more question.
Wonderful panel. I think looks like it's very clear. Problem is the solution to the problem is matters, but technology is not matters, is what I'm hearing loud and clear from all of you guys. But having said that, how do you see that AI impacting your company's long-term strategic goal? And what steps being taken to ensure alignment between AI initiatives and overall business goals?
Anybody wants to pick it up?
I'm a little tempted to walk back the it's all about the business problem. Like, there's no worse job for a technologist than to come into a highly successful company that was all about solving the business problem and realize that they have amassed technical debt for 8 years that can't be paid down anymore. So I think that, and I don't think you meant it literally, right? That there is a balance to be maintained there of keeping on top of things.
I think the other answer I would have is I think that the data collection part is still very important. Right? I think it doesn't matter what industry you're in, what business problem you're solving. I think it's like building structures and systems where you can collect data effectively and then be able to kind of apply these models as whatever models end up being the ones that you use to be able to apply them effectively. Also, both of those require actually a significant amount of thought and effort.
To really
Go ahead.
To really build on that, one of the things that I've seen be both success, our biggest successes come with organizations that don't forget the human side of data. So human process automation, human knowledge management, human data. This is stuff that we can now encode, quite frankly, in various types of models. We can scale in ways that we never could before. So it's not just about implementing new sensors or when we say getting data, getting it out of streams, but also don't forget that there are parts of the world, and there are, in fact, processes where labor is fairly cheap. And it's actually less expensive to bring in human experts and model what they're doing and use that than it is to actually try to gather data from machine-based processes.
Yeah, and I'll say really expanding on that human piece. I'm always looking at the human in the loop, right? There is no exception to that. We are at a point where we have to make sure that to align with those business goals and values and requirements, we've got to have that human in the loop guiding the use, whether it's in that first bucket of traditional AI, in the off-the-shelf AI, the generative AI, or whether it's that AI as a service in every aspect. There's got to be that human in the loop, whether it's an external product or an internal function that we're applying our AI capabilities to.
Thank you. So before I hand it back to Emily, I would like to really thank the panelists. So join me.